Good evening, everyone. Joyous to be able to be with all of you in this time. We're going to do this until about 9:15. We've got just enough questions that I don't have to categorize them, and we can actually address each question with each of the speakers. I'm going to begin with Nathan, but as is the case with all of these, and my predecessor taught me this well, we want to frame the question, or at least frame the conversation. And just listening to the talks and thinking through everything, it's very clear that the framing of the conversation has to do with what masculinity actually is versus what it's been perverted to become. And so the nature of the questions seem to tackle that as well. So I'm going to begin actually with Nathan. Nathan, you listened to the talks today. You've been involved with different levels of mentorship and leadership in Father Gabriel Rashad, especially with the households group. So you're involved in the work of, in this case, honing virtuous masculinity. I'm asking this question for you personally, from your perspective, as well as mentoring young men. How do you balance the call to discipline boys without crushing their spirit?
Can you say that one more time?
How do you balance the call to discipline boys without crushing their spirit? By the way, this is a question that's going to everyone as well, but I want to start with Nathan.
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you for asking it. I mean, this is definitely a hard one, and what I see in our generation, it's the idea of anxiety, and Pete was talking about, like, we're identity. And so you want to, like, jump into a role, you want to have that discipline, but the issue is a lot of people, especially, like, men, young men, is that they don't have that courage. They don't have people to, like, almost lead them into that role. And so it's that issue of, like, grappling by yourself, like stepping into that position. And it's really hard when you don't know where you're going. But if you can come to, like, find your identity, like that being Christ, of course, and you can use those virtues to, like, as a means to achieve that, you can take that courage to take those steps. Not to say it's going to be easy, it is very hard. As we're saying, the furnace of humiliation, that's going to be anywhere. Anytime you try to take a big step into a role, you're gonna fail. But that's just along the path of growing. And so you have to manage responding to that failure and to that anxiety, stepping into that role. I think the best way to do that is through prayer.
Pete, as a husband, father, but also as a minister of the word, you mentor young men in ministry, the same question, both from the perspective of one who's had his spirit healthily crushed in that regard, as you mentioned, the furnace of humiliation, but also one who finds yourself in a position needing to do that.
Yeah. Well, discipline is God's idea, right? So Scripture tells us that the Lord disciplines those whom He loves. So the concept of discipline is not a bad thing, it's a good thing. Healthy discipline, in my opinion, comes from relationship and a trusting relationship. So to receive discipline from somebody that you know loves you and is walking with you and desires the best for you is just completely different than somebody you don't know, or it feels arbitrary, or, you know, just unnecessarily hard-hearted or whatever. And so the other key, though, is the person doing the disciplinarian needs to discipline from a place of wholeness, not hurt, right? So that adage of hurt people, right? And so if you find yourself, and this is very, I mean, I have kids in the back, literally my children are in the back, so I gotta be careful here, but there are times, we all know, like, what is erupting out of you is like, just because there might be a moment that they've really messed up, but the reaction to that might be pretty, like, not balanced, or not coming from a good place of love and peace and all the fruits that I mentioned. And so to be able to, as best as possible, discipline from a place of healing yourself and of wholeness within yourself, so that it's coming from truly a heart that desires the good outcome for the child, makes a huge difference. Because the whole point of discipline is an action of love. It's to say, I actually love you enough to help you take steps to flourish. And the guardrails of life, in terms of keeping us on the path of virtue, we bump into those sometimes, but just imagine if we didn't have the guardrail. You go right over the edge. And so to establish that guardrail can be painful and can be emotionally distressing, but that was one of the greatest gifts my dad gave me, is he was always my father before my friend. We had a great friendship, but I never lost track of the fact that he was first my father, and his legitimate authority was something that I needed to respect. But it came from a loving, trusting relationship that he worked to establish.
Dr. Shavy, husband, father, but also as a medical professional, so you're dealing with this from different perspectives as well. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's kind of how you present it. Discipline has a pejorative nature to it, like it's punishment. But really, it's redirection. If you're going down a street, going the complete wrong direction to go to your destination, and somebody says, no, you need to go this direction, in some ways that's discipline. But what it really is helping you to achieve what you really want to achieve in the right way. Right? Coach Harbaugh, supposedly, when he was here, used to say that after practice, we run sprints, and whoever wins gets to run more because they deserve to get better. Right? Why does God give us our crosses? Because he says we deserve to get better. He's giving us that opportunity.
Father, from the perspective of a spiritual father, I know you deal with this on a very personal level. So disciplining the men in your life without crushing their spirit.
I liked what Doctor said, particularly in that regards to recognizing the charity of helping someone see, oh, I've been going in the wrong direction. And this comes into the life of a priest in many ways, sometimes in the confessional, but also in preaching, giving people that framework of understanding. Talks about in 1 Corinthians, in the race, all the runners run, but only one receives the prize. So run so as to win. And an athlete trains his body in many ways. How much more should we, because we're training for an imperishable crown? And so, like you said, it's that helping people understand, actually, where are we going? What are we called to? Who are we meant to be? That if we fail to that, it's then easy to say, oh, I can settle for just being what I am right now. I mean, I'm okay with that. Why is that? Isn't that enough? But no, the Lord has invited you into something so much more. The Lord is inviting you into something so much more powerful. And that role of discipline is that kind of training, is that correction, is that sense of, no, actually, let's go this way. Let's go toward where we're actually meant to be, not to where you're just kind of heading currently. So, yeah, that's what I would say.
Let's start this next question with you, Father. Very broad spectrum, so I'd invite all of you to share your unique, specific expertise to the question. What is the one thing I can do to actively combat the crisis of masculinity? And again, the crisis of masculinity is very broad spectrum. The three of you have touched on a few things. What's the one thing someone can do? So a very specific exhortation from each of you about how we can start combating the crisis of masculinity. You first, Father.
That's right, he did. I mean, it sounds simple, but as I mentioned in the talk, just recognition that we're made for intimacy with the Lord. So even that simple thing is simply to start your day with prayer. That was a life-changing thing for me as a sophomore in high school when I started getting up 10 minutes earlier than I used to. In my scramble to get out the door, I'd wake up 10 minutes earlier and actually just spend that time with the Scripture, spending that time coming to know the Lord. And it really was that foundation that then allowed me to, respond to God's call in my life and love the Lord and serve others. But it started with, what if I start every day seeking my identity in the Lord and seeking the intimacy with God?
Does it really only have to be one thing? All right, I'm going to give like a slightly annoying answer and then a more serious one. Well, but they're both serious.
You've got 10, it's in the book.
Yeah, right, exactly. That was like, read the book. I think it's Chesterton. You probably know this. When somebody asks them, like, how do you solve the problems of the world, or what's wrong with the world, right? And what does he say? Me. Like, the starting point of solving the big problems of the world is always first being as holy and transformed as we can be. Like, first going to war in our own heart before we go to war out in the culture. So that's one answer. But maybe the one that more unique for tonight is I think we need to fast as a community. I think we need to intentionally deprive ourselves of things for the combating of this. There's this really compelling moment in the Gospels where Jesus sends out his disciples and they go 2 by 2 and they do all sorts of really cool things and they cast out demons and then they come back and they debrief, right? And they're kind of like, this was amazing, we did this and this. And then they're like, but sometimes it didn't work, And Jesus says something that's so important. He says, certain spirits can only be cast out through prayer and fasting. And I really believe the spirit of the age right now is one of those spirits that has such a hold on the hearts and minds of people that the people of God need to be praying against it, but we need to be fasting against it. I only saw my dad drink 1 sip of alcohol my whole life. It's because he lost a bet to my brother, and it was at my wedding. And he had given up alcohol for his marriage. So 40 years of faithful Catholic marriage. I only saw him eat chocolate probably 4 or 5 times because he gave up chocolate for my purity and my brother's chastity. So fasting is not fun. I don't know many people who really love it. Catherine of Siena did, but everybody else seems to struggle with it. But it's powerful and it works. And I'm curious what would happen if the people of God, and particularly the men of God in our community, really started to fast.
I believe that the most active step you can take coming out of today to grow in a man is to put yourself conscientiously in those positions which you think are like innately masculine. So, for example, like if you think like a man is a leader, a man is sacrificial, you have to put yourself in that position. Like Aquinas talks about it, virtues are habitual. You have to like grow in them. They're not just going to come to you. I mean, you can pray, like they're a blessing from God, but there's also some effort on our part to develop those. So if you truly want to like grow in masculinity and a specific trait of masculinity, you have to put yourself in that position and work. And you're going to fail again. I can't say that enough, but you just have to continue to persevere through it.
These are questions where it's good when you can go forth because you can have time to think about it. So my answer is courage.
You're starting the next one.
My answer is courage. What I mean by that is courage not to let the definition of man be an emasculated model. The courage not to let the definition of man be the libertine model. The courage to be humble, like was in the video with Jackie Robinson. And the courage to be courageous when you're being called to do something that you may be fearful to do.
Okay, so let's build from that answer of courage. A few of the questions, I'm bundling this. It has to do with the struggles that all of you mentioned. Pornography, peer pressure, the crisis of identity. I want to invite you to speak to why you think it is that men are struggling with these things today more than in previous generations, or specifically the way they're struggling today more than previous generations. And then secondarily, actually let's just stop there, because then the secondary thing is community. But why do you think it is that today's struggles are more unique than the past?
Well, I think some of it is that the methods and the techniques of the devil now are much more efficient at allowing our base tendencies to be accentuated. So you can look at pornography. I mean, people have lusted forever. That's not a new sin. Right. But the technology that allows pornography to be so ever-present is new. So I think some of it is that. I think some of it is even the way our society has changed. I go back to the slide I had up about the Indians. The definition of a man then was somebody who could do the physical things that were necessary. Look at the Industrial Revolution. Look at our technology. Men are not required to do that in the same way they used to. I hurt my wrist one day, and I went to the the hand surgeon, and I said, if I swing an axe, it hurts. He's like, well, why are you swinging an axe? Use a tool. And I'm like, because I want to swing an axe, But that wasn't his view. So, but the point is, men don't have to do those physical things anymore. And so I think the definition, like my first slide, what's the value of a man if we're not being asked to do that? And so I think we have to carve out that a little bit more clearly about what the true value of a man is.
Same question. I invite if the three of you have insights on the question. Why are the struggles of men today more unique than struggles of the past?
Yeah, I think I can give it a unique perspective and anecdote because I'm in high school right now, so I can see it in our younger generation. I think it's a social norm to do a sin. It's not viewed as bad. It's you would say that something such as vaping isn't looked down on because people are indifferent towards it, or actually you're incentivized to do it, and that can be applied to many different sins out there. So the question is, I think there's fantastic role models in the age range between 40 and 60. There's a lot of great men out there, but for someone like me, how applicable is a man in that age range in comparison to a senior as a freshman coming in? Those are the people I look up to. Those are the people who are cool. So we need people who are in our age range to take that step to show us that actually this isn't good, to show us what the true objective good is. So we need more people like that, and that comes from those 40 to 60-year-olds teaching those men, and then it's going to be a cascade down.
I think you get the kind of men you expect. I think it's just the fact of our culture today that we expect very little of 18-year-old men. Like I talked about in the talk at the beginning, I was talking about the apostles, but we could even look back to the 1940s and these 18-year-olds that stormed the beaches of Normandy. We expected them to do that. We expected them to put their lives in the line, to embrace the responsibility to, and then they came home and they raised families and they did things all at the ages that right now most men are in college, wasting a good chunk of their life, and then come back to live in their parents' basement and play video games. So we expect very little from men. And now, why do we expect so little? Well, I think that's a bigger question, but I think that expectation of what is a man supposed to be doing as an 18-year-old, as a 22-year-old. We see men getting married in their 30s now instead of back in those days when they were married in their early 20s, and actually getting about the great work of being a father and raising children, raising a family, building a home. So we get what we expect.
I mean, I think we're in a unique period of human history where, at least in the Western world, the church, we're in a post-Christian reality. So we still have a lot of the trappings of Christendom. We still have churches. We still have, a lot of the things you could point to, colleges that have Catholic on their name and everything. But it's very much almost a lukewarm at best reality often in terms of what traditional Catholic structures, you say, well, yeah, that's still a vestige of Christendom, but it's really a post-Christian reality. And so I think we're still very much learning what it means to be a church in a post-Christian world, where it's just different that the culture thinks they know what Catholicism is all about and has basically shrugged at it. There are people who are angry at the church, but the vast majority of young people who are leaving the church are leaving because they're bored. They don't understand, they don't see why it would really be any of any value to them. It doesn't have a compelling message, and it certainly doesn't kind of grab them and call them and expect something great for them. And then you combine that with a particularly neutered church right now because of scandals and all these things, when the church should have been most at the precipice, being able to speak into these different sexual sins and at a high moral level. We've been just wrecked with these scandals, which then just undercuts the whole moral authority of the church. And people go like, I don't want to listen to you. You can't keep your own house in order. Yeah. And so it's a double whammy. The culture's running in the opposite direction of the gospel, and the church, our salt has gone flat in many places, and the light has gone dim. Not everywhere. I've been in Brazil a couple times this year, and there's a lot to love about the Brazilian way of going about Jesus, right? I mean, the church in Brazil is alive, and there's faith and hope, or the church in Africa is growing in different ways. So it's not like it's all darkness and doom and gloom, but I think in particular, the church is not even standing on its own 2 feet to proclaim a counter message. It's still just trying to struggle how to get back up onto its feet, and then you combine that with a society that's post-Christian. It's a bad combination.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. And so much of what all four of you have answered are drawing from the wisdom of people like Lewis. Father, tell me you read C.S. Lewis without telling me you read C.S. Lewis, right? You've drawn from Chesterton, St. Thomas Aquinas, natural law. In light of all of this, we've got the question of virtue, this question of what makes a man, from a natural level to a theological level. Just in very simple terms, share a little bit of what your thoughts are. We can start with you, Father. I saw what Pete did, so you have to do it. Mm-hmm.
Looking at the model of Jesus Christ, we hear, especially in Ephesians 5, that a man is called to imitate Christ, who laid down his life for the church. And so we see at this essence of being a man, this sense of that your life is then lived. Your life is lived for the sake of others. That this call to protect and cultivate given to Adam is a call that requires you to stand in the breach, to hold back the storm, to then be this one who is willing to give of himself. I think this is why at the heart of almost every culture's vision of masculinity has been this call to courage and to self-sacrifice. I think it's because we know that wounded man is too easily prone to self-indulgence. But at its height, in the call that we see in Christ, and the call that other cultures have tried to echo and see, is that man is actually meant to give of himself so that others may live. And so I think that really is at the very core of what it means to be a man.
Well, he took the easy answer of Christ. That's what I was going to say. So I'm going to have to go a different direction with this one. But yeah, I had that in my theology class last week.
I know, trust a Catholic priest to tell you, look at Jesus Christ, right?
Yeah, but in any regard, I would say you can measure the goodness of a thing insofar that it does its end cause. So like that's what it's oriented to do. So you'd say like for a cup, it's good if it doesn't spill water, if it holds it. So for a person, that same logic applies. Like you're good insofar that you do what you're made to do. And like as Father so clearly said, like we're made to live with Christ. And so how can we could we be a good man, like a good woman, a good anything? It's like we live in the manner that allows us, that leads us towards Christ. And again, like I think that's virtues. Like virtues are those means that lead us towards the highest good. So practice your virtues.
I'm going to go back to something I said earlier, which is courage, and I look at the example of St. Joseph. So, and really it's the courage to say yes, really no matter what the question is. So St. Joseph was a good Jew, an observant Jew, a virtuous Jew, and when he found out Mary was pregnant, he was going to do the right thing by divorcing her in a very discreet way, until God told him otherwise. And then what was his answer? His answer was yes. I will marry her. Even though he didn't know what he was getting into, he said, yes, I will marry her. And God says, you're going to raise my son. You're going to be the earthly father to my son. And he says, yes. And then they have to flee, and he has to protect his family. But he had the courage to say yes, no matter what the challenge, what the question was. So I think that's what it means.
I'm not going to answer the question because I feel like it's been answered pretty well by these guys and throughout the talks already. But maybe I just want to highlight one thing that's undervalued right now is in these answers and in this, even today, it can be very easy to kind of like talk about man, and it's good to do this, but in almost like an esoteric way of like this kind of high ideal that, and you go, yeah, okay, but I have to like go home and there's a dirty diaper, or I have to go home and the dishes are in the sink, or I have to go home and my wife is half happy that I went to the talk, you know? Like she's conceptually glad that I was there, but really feeling like, oh, it's been a tough night, you know? Like, and all of you, your pockets have been buzzing with emails and all the stuff is so real. And so I want to highlight too of like, all of this, yes, and also men, what it means to be a man is just like do the next right thing in the grind, and to find joy in the grind, and to find joy in the quiet, in the hidden, in the simple. I mean, I wish there was more in the scripture sometime of like the details of what the Holy Family's life was like for all those years in Nazareth, where Joseph forgot to shower and Mary's like, Joseph, before you get to the dinner table, like clean up a little bit, or you know, like all the very normal earthly things, you know. Like to just be radically committed to doing the right thing right here and now. An eye on heaven, certainly, and an eye on the high call and the ideal and walking in the gap, absolutely. But also like living in the right in front of us as well. And being really taking delight in the routine and the boring. Because most of life, right, is in that kind of routine, boring thing. Boring isn't necessarily bad, but that just kind of day in, day out, I'm just doing it, and I'm just staying in it. And so the guys out there, just like stay in it, because so much of fatherhood is just staying in it. So much of being a disciple is just don't stop. Just stay in the grind of it.
So you did answer the question.
I did, yeah, sorry.
This is the second to last question, if you don't mind, Joe. So this really is a genuine concern, especially for all of us in ministry, young men struggling to find women who are open to marriage, let alone open to marriage early on with modern feminism and the ideologies involved. So how do young men express their masculinity well with young women who have been trained to reject it? Just a broad spectrum, rejected societally, but also reject in terms of virtuous advances and whatnot.
So I've been living on this courage theme, so I'll go ahead and stay with that for I guess right now. But I think if you have to have the courage of your convictions, you have to have the courage of who you are. And I think that is attractive to women. I mean, not that I'm going to be the guy who's going to tell you what women are attracted to, but my point is, just like the church, like Pete talked about the church, if the church is neutered, who's going to want to be attracted to a church that's afraid to say what the church believes in, that's afraid to stand up for what the church is? You know, I think Peter, what's his name? Kreeft talks about an experience where the Muslim was talking about the crucifixes being taken off the walls, and he said, why would anybody be attracted to a religion that's afraid to leave their crucifix up? So why is a woman going to be attracted to a man who's afraid to be who he is and who's afraid to have the convictions of what it really means to be a man and using the Christian ideals of what that is?
Well, I'm not married, if you guys couldn't have guessed, so I can't really give the best story of this, but what I can simply say is, at least what I've seen in high school with guys going and courting girls per se, is like a lack of courage and like leadership in that. You don't really see, like, you see them like maybe like hang out in the car for a little bit, but like never take her on a date or treat her well. So like, I can only talk to that courting phase, but I'd say if any of you are thinking of doing that, take her out to a nice date and get some flowers.
I think on a similar note, I just think that women are attracted to genuine masculinity. I think that, I don't think our culture is so far gone that a man being virtuous, a man being courageous, a man seeking to put the woman first, a man seeking to follow the Lord above all things, a man seeking to kind of live out what you may call chivalry. I think women are genuinely attracted to that, to a guy who is humble, but also confident, to a guy who does love the Lord and is not ashamed of that, a guy who is willing to do what needs to be done for the sake of others and not simply looking at himself. And I think generally in my experience of Catholic circles, there's the women who complain about there not being enough men. So men, if you're looking to step up into this, there's going to be actually a lot of women around. Don't worry.
You should discern the priesthood. Yeah. Especially you, Nate. No, okay. Just to make everyone uncomfortable. No, I would actually agree. In all the work we've done, it's usually the opposite complaint. As all the young holy women are like, "Where are the guys?"
Right.
And that breaks my heart. And this is one of the reasons we're doing what we're doing, is to try to raise up as many virtuous young men as possible. I'm working on a little side project with my brother called Flirting Like a Disciple, to learn how to help these guys actually have virtuous game, because I'm not joking. We're actually working on this, and I'm making light of it in a sense, but I'm not. I think there is an actual problem of even knowing how to woo a woman, or as Nate so eloquently said, court a woman, which I'm sure you've used many times in normal language. But that's actually something you learn from other men, generally. It's like actually I learned a lot about how to relate to women and smile and compliment women because of Brian. He's 6 years older than me. I mean, hopefully this doesn't scandalize anyone, but one time we were in high school. He was 6 years old. I was a freshman in high school, so he was in college. We were down at Disney World, and there was a very cute lifeguard, and Brian said, "Go talk to her." I said, "Absolutely not." And he said, "All right, well then watch." And he walked over and he talked to her, and then the next lifeguard, I had to go talk to her. And we weren't like lusting after her. We weren't like, we just were relating, but I was learning something from him about what it looked like to have the confidence and have how to ask a question, how to compliment with a smile. All those things are so important. But I also think this is one of those areas where we really need to be in the world but not of it. We don't actually want to play the same game as the world here. And the more the men and women can be collaborative in actually creating a counterculture of dating, of courtship, of virtue, of fun, of flirtation, all of that's in the world but not of it. And I think too often we try to actually kind of play the game the way the world invites us to, and then wonder why we have the same consequences as the world.
Right.
And actually this is one of those areas I think we need to be more vigilant of actually doing it quite differently. But it doesn't mean it's not fun, it doesn't mean it's not enjoyable, it doesn't mean there's not like some pizzazz to it, but it doesn't mean it has to be done the way the world's offering.
My final question, and feel free to not answer if you don't have something to contribute to this. Just based on what Pete just said about capitulating to some of the categories and standards of the world, how much of a lot of the issues that men in the church today face is based on a feminization of leadership in the church, in ministry as well as in the clergy maybe, and if you have an exhortation for men today listening to move forward?
You said how much of
the issues that Catholic men are facing today is due to and a feminization, if you will, of leadership in the church?
Well, I think there's just been a lack of respect for leadership, not just in the church, but I think that's a transcendent thing. And when leadership fails, whether it's in science or politics or the church, people then become their own leaders. And so I think that's what happens is instead of us recognizing some transcendent goods and some transcendent truths, we create our own. And we do that across whatever area it is. And I think that's the challenge. And I think we have to learn where we can be discriminating against what leadership is doing. Obviously, with the church crisis, you don't want to be docile to people who are doing bad things. So you have to be discriminating, but you have to be discriminating in a way that you don't deny that there are truths and that you don't deny the role of authority. And so, I just think you have to be able to understand that difference. If only there was a book that could help us with any of this.
In regards to my experience in high school, I'd actually say at FGR, it's a beautiful thing. We have a lot of women leaders, especially in comparison to guys. Like, we just put up our board today of top scholars, and you'll see the majority of them are women. And that could just be we just get a great group of women, but I think it goes deeper than that as well. Where it's a concept of if men don't fill their inherent task or their responsibility, women are going to step up and fill it. And so if you want help with that issue, and also it's almost like stepping into a position of leadership sometimes is actually an act of sacrifice. It's an act of service. To take that step of courage and do it, you're helping out, especially if you have the faculties and the abilities to do so. So I would say if we want to find a remedy to this issue, we have to have men who step up, and it comes to courage. You can get that from role models, from Christ, from Scripture, but I think at a base level it has to be you taking that step.
I think we're seeing a shift in society as a whole from a leadership that comes from a place of authority to a leadership that comes from a place of influence. I think that people look for, particularly these days, especially looking on the internet, it's these people who have this vast influence versus someone simply who has a title or a position. And I think that's kind of, in a lot of ways, trickled into the church. I think there's less respect for someone given an authority or a title in the church versus someone you look to maybe who has an internet presence or who has a speaking presence. I think this is something I think it's important to be aware of in our own framework then, and as we're seeking to be faithful to the church, that the church really is built on authority. It's built on the authority Christ gave to Peter, the authority he gave to his apostles and handed down. And that sometimes I think church leaders can be slow to recognize that shift that's happening. They think they have to lead from a place purely of authority when actually there's this invitation in this kind of culture that's losing the sense of Christendom and respect for authority. Okay, then how do we have this kind of seek to have more of a role of influence, but in that also a role of we need to actually be re-evangelizing and just recognizing the age we're in that actually calls us to this kind of apostolic preaching and zeal, and recognizing we can't speak simply from a place of an authority, but have to actually try to win them back to Christ, have this influence to draw them back to our Lord, which I think is a shift. And I don't necessarily know if it goes particularly with a feminization, but I think for some leaders in the church, they can struggle with that, and when their authority isn't received, the temptation then can be to withdraw, to no longer actually try to live that out or to enter into that, but to see themselves at that point being rejected and then no longer actually live out the role they have.
The church needs strong women. The church needs strong female leaders. And John Paul II has been, the whole idea of feminine genius is such a wonderful contribution to our understanding of the complementarity between men and women. And so I don't know. I don't like the question. No offense, but it's because what it's implying is that somehow femininity is the problem, and I don't think that it is. I think it's if you're going to ascribe certain masculine disintegration as then feminine expressions, that sets up almost like a false dichotomy of that. it's actually a masculine problem that we're disintegrating and not being fully who we are called to be, just as we need women to be fully who they are called to be. Like when men are great, women thrive, and children thrive when men are great. Similarly, when women are great, men thrive. It's not an either or here. It's a both and. And so I think it zeroes more in on the problem of saying what is not working within the masculine genius within the church. Certainly we could do a whole conference on what is a woman and what's going on with femininity in society right now. There's a crisis of both. But I think the more we can not set it up as pitted against each other, and more we can set it up as like supporting each other and working together and equally trying to thrive together, I think that actually will lead to better outcomes as opposed to this like, I have to somehow tear you down in order to explain me. And I don't like that.
That's fair, that's fair. And I think the spirit I got from the question given had to do with exactly what you said, that men were not rising up to be what is fully masculine, which leads to final exhortation in, let's say, 3 words each of you. What would you like to say as final words in terms of rising up in masculinity and manhood?
Go make disciples.
3 words.
Nailed it.
Read Pete's book. There you go.
Wait, can I do one?
Yeah.
Buy Pete's book.
There you go. Yeah. First, yeah.
Steal Pete's book. Be very courageous.
There we go. Yeah.
Be not afraid.
Oh, very good.